Julius Caesar, Opposition to Caesar's Power, 44 BC. Chapter 1, Fear of Centralized Power.
Senatorial alarm, growing fears of Caesar's absolute control.
As Julius Caesar continued to consolidate power, a significant portion of the Roman Senate began to feel increasingly marginalized and alarmed. The Senate, traditionally the ruling body of the Roman Republic, saw its influence wane as Caesar took on more executive authority, bypassing many of the checks and balances that had previously restrained individual power. Caesar's appointment as dictator for life in early 44 BC was particularly unsettling for the senatorial class. This unprecedented move effectively made Caesar the supreme ruler of Rome, a position that many feared would lead to the establishment of a monarchy, anathema to the Roman Republic's values. The traditional aristocracy, who prided themselves on their lineage and role in governing the Republic, felt their status and influence were being eroded by Caesar's centralization of power. Moreover, Caesar's reforms, which included expanding the Senate by adding his supporters and reducing the power of old aristocratic families, were viewed as direct threats to the established order. The Senate, already wary of Caesar's ambitions, began to see him not as a temporary ruler, but as a tyrant who intended to dismantle the Republic in favor of his personal rule. These growing fears of Caesar's absolute control set the stage for increasing discontent and laid the groundwork for the eventual conspiracy against him.
Republic in danger. Concerns about the Republic's survival under Caesar.
Historians of both ancient and modern times have frequently highlighted the growing concern among Rome's political elite regarding the survival of the Republic under Julius Caesar's rule. While Caesar's extraordinary military achievements and charismatic leadership earned him widespread admiration, they also sowed deep seeds of anxiety within the senatorial class. Ancient historians such as Suetonius and Plutarch recount the pervasive fear that Caesar's rise marked the end of the Roman Republic as it had been known for centuries. The Senate, a body that had long been the cornerstone of Roman governance, found itself increasingly sidelined as Caesar accumulated titles and powers that effectively placed him above the law. With each new title, whether as consul, dictator, or Pontifex Maximus, the perception grew that Caesar was positioning himself as more than just a leader. He was becoming the embodiment of Roman authority itself. This centralization of power was perceived not just as a threat to the Republic's political structures, but also to its very identity. Historians like Tacitus argue that Caesar's accumulation of power was a direct challenge to the traditions that had defined Roman governance. His willingness to override the Senate, to legislate unilaterally, and to implement reforms that bypassed traditional processes were seen as signs that the Republic was in mortal danger. Even those who had once supported Caesar began to question whether his rule was leading Rome toward monarchy, a system the Republic had fiercely rejected since the expulsion of the Tarquin kings centuries earlier. As Caesar prepared for further military campaigns and continued to consolidate his control, these fears were exacerbated by his actions and the reactions they provoked. His planned campaign against Parthia, while strategically sound, was viewed by some as a way to distract the Roman populace and the Senate from his domestic power grab. Additionally, his acceptance of honors that were typically reserved for deities, including the controversial proposal to have a statue of himself placed among the gods, fueled speculation that Caesar sought to elevate himself to a divine status, further undermining the Republic's republican ideals. The atmosphere in Rome grew tense as the reality set in. The Republic, once the proud center of Roman identity, was now at risk of being overshadowed by a single man's ambition. The belief that the Republic could not survive under Caesar's rule became a rallying cry for those who feared the end of their political freedoms and the emergence of a new form of governance, one that was antithetical to the principles that had guided Rome for centuries.
Chapter 2, Betrayal and Conspiracy.
Former allies turn. Cassius and Brutus distanced themselves from Caesar.
The early stages of the turn against Julius Caesar by his former allies, most notably Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus, are well documented by historians such as Suetonius, Plutarch, and Appian. These historians recount how both men, once close to Caesar and beneficiaries of his political and military success, began to distance themselves as his power grew more absolute and his intentions less clear. Cassius, a seasoned military commander who had served with distinction under Caesar during the Gallic Wars, was one of the first to become disillusioned. As Caesar's power grew, Cassius's concerns about the erosion of republican ideals intensified. Ancient sources suggest that Cassius's personal ambitions were thwarted by Caesar's dominance, and he began to view Caesar not just as a political rival, but as a threat to the republic itself. Plutarch notes that Cassius's growing resentment was fueled by what he perceived as Caesar's disregard for the traditional political processes and the Senate's authority. Cassius's discontent transformed into outright opposition as he feared that Caesar's continued rule would spell the end of the Senate's influence and the republican form of government. Brutus, on the other hand, had a more complex relationship with Caesar. A relative of Caesar by marriage and the son of Caesar's mistress, Servilia, Brutus had been treated with exceptional favor by Caesar. Caesar had even spared Brutus's life after the Battle of Pharsalus, choosing to pardon him rather than punish him for siding with Pompey. This personal connection made Brutus's eventual betrayal all the more poignant. Despite his ties to Caesar, Brutus was deeply committed to the ideals of the Republic, and as Caesar's power grew, so did his internal conflict. Plutarch writes extensively about Brutus's philosophical leanings, influenced by Stoicism, which led him to prioritize the Republic's survival over personal loyalty to Caesar. According to Suetonius, Brutus's decision to join the conspiracy was not taken lightly. It was a gradual process spurred by a growing belief that Caesar's rule was incompatible with the freedom of the Roman people. Historians agree that the turning point for both Cassius and Brutus came when Caesar was declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, in February 44 BC. This act crystallized their fears that Caesar intended to dismantle the Republic entirely. Cassius, already harboring deep resentment, saw this as confirmation of Caesar's tyrannical ambitions, while Brutus was finally convinced that the Republic could only be saved through drastic measures. The decision to turn against Caesar was thus rooted in a mixture of personal grievances, political ideals, and the fear that their beloved republic was on the brink of destruction. The shift in loyalty from these former allies was not merely a personal betrayal, but a reflection of the broader disillusionment among Rome's elite. Appian notes that this sentiment was shared by many senators who had initially supported Caesar but became increasingly uncomfortable with his consolidation of power. The defection of Cassius and Brutus from Caesar's camp marked the beginning of the end for Caesar's unchecked rule. Their decision to distance themselves set in motion the conspiracy that would ultimately lead to Caesar's assassination, a move they believed was necessary to preserve the Republic.
Plotting against Caesar, conspiracy forms to restore the Republic's authority.
As Julius Caesar's power continued to expand, the sentiment among Rome's political elite shifted from unease to active opposition. The conspiracy against him was not born overnight, but developed gradually, fueled by the collective fear that the Republic's days were numbered if Caesar remained unchallenged. This growing opposition was characterized by secret meetings, whispered conversations, and the slow but deliberate organization of a group that included some of Rome's most respected and influential figures. The conspirators were a diverse group, united not by a single ideology, but by a shared belief that Caesar's rule threatened the very fabric of the Republic. These men, many of whom had fought alongside Caesar or served under him, began to see themselves as defenders of Roman tradition and liberty. They were driven by the belief that restoring the Republic required decisive action, even if it meant betraying someone who had once been a friend or ally. Ancient sources, including Appian and Cassius Dio, suggest that the conspiracy was as much about preserving their own status within the traditional power structure as it was about protecting the Republic. Among the conspirators, there was a deep sense of urgency. They were acutely aware that time was running out. Caesar's position was growing stronger, and with each passing day, the possibility of reversing his reforms and restoring the Senate's authority diminished. The conspiracy was marked by a sense of desperation, as many of these men had tried and failed to curb Caesar's power through legal and political means. The failure of these efforts left them with little choice but to consider more drastic measures. Interestingly, the conspiracy was not entirely clandestine. There were rumors and suspicions within Rome's political circles, and some senators not directly involved were aware of the growing discontent. However, Caesar's immense popularity with the people and his control over the military made open opposition risky. This forced the conspirators to operate in the shadows, carefully planning their moves to avoid detection while ensuring that their efforts would have the desired impact. The conspirators also faced the challenge of maintaining unity within their ranks. The group included men with varying motivations. Some were driven by a genuine concern for the Republic, while others were motivated by personal ambition or a desire for revenge. Keeping these disparate elements aligned and focused on the common goal of restoring the Republic required careful negotiation and compromise. Despite these challenges, the conspirators remained committed to their cause, believing that their actions were necessary to prevent the loss of Roman liberty and the permanent establishment of autocratic rule. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great content like this. Hit the bell icon to get notifications whenever we upload new videos so you never miss out. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more exciting videos.
The voices in this recording were created with the assistance of OpenAI.